There is a moment no one teaches, no one discusses, and certainly no one celebrates. It's the subtle instant when your mind quietly refuses to accept the obvious. A common phrase, a routine behavior, a belief repeated endlessly. Suddenly, it all begins to feel strange, as if something within you refuses to sleep one more day. And that's how it begins, not with noise, but with uncomfortable silences. The world around you remains the same. People laugh at the same jokes, share the same ideas, follow the same paths. But you feel absent, present only in body, because something inside your mind no longer fits. It's like being awake in a collective dream, realizing everyone is hypnotized, except you. And that clarity is a bitter gift, because with it comes emotional exile. No one casts you out, but you feel it. The distancing, the avoided eyes, the conversations that never touch what truly matters. You begin to see that thinking independently is a lonely act, that the courage to see comes with a cost few are willing to pay. Rejection, solitude, misunderstanding disguised as politeness, because your awakening reveals the anesthesia in others, and that hurts. But you continue, even with doubts, you continue, because something in you already knows there's no turning back. Once the mind expands, it never returns to its original size. And on this path, every step toward your truth is a silent rupture, a break with the lies you once upheld, with the narratives you repeated just to belong. Today, you no longer want to belong, you want to exist, without dimming your light, without molding yourself. And maybe that's why you're here, because this channel isn't a common space. It's a shelter for minds that, like yours, are crossing the invisible, the underworld of consciousness. And if you feel this calling, keep going, because in the next few minutes, we'll go deeper. We'll expose what the human mind doesn't like to reveal. We'll uncover the hidden cost of thinking differently. And maybe, by the end, you'll realize that this cost is the price of being awake. Now, I invite you to pause, just for a moment, and ask yourself, have you ever felt this way? That subtle sense of not belonging, not because you're wrong, but because you're awake. If this resonates with you, then this video isn't just a story, it's your reflection. Scroll down to the comments right now and write, "I've seen too much to pretend anymore." Let this be your echo, your signal, your rebellion in silence. Because here, your voice is not just heard, it's recognized. And while you're there, read what others have written. You'll realize you're not the only one walking this path. There's a whole constellation of minds out there, breaking free from the same illusion. This isn't about likes or algorithms. It's about building a field, a neural space, where minds like yours can finally breathe, where the truth doesn't need to be loud to be felt. So don't just watch, participate, share, comment, because every word you write might be the whisper someone else needed to hear tonight. This is how we begin, with one sentence, typed in darkness, that says, "I'm still here, and I'm not going back." It doesn't begin with rebellion. It begins with doubt. A whisper inside your mind that questions what everyone else accepts without blinking. A quiet resistance that forms in the gap between what you see and what you're told to believe. This isn't arrogance. It's perception, sharpening. It's your mind refusing to remain blind just to belong. And yet, from the moment you start to see, you start to lose. Not things, but people, environments, certainties. You begin to notice how deeply reality is built upon repetition. Not truth, not curiosity, but conformity. Patterns designed not to be questioned, only followed. And each time you deviate, you trigger discomfort in others, because your presence challenges their sleep. You try to remain, to adapt, to hold on to what was, but something is shifting, and you can't undo it. The laughter feels empty, the goals feel borrowed, the relationships feel scripted, like everyone is playing a role in a story that no longer fits your narrative. And that's the moment it hits you. Awakening isn't about light, it's about fracture. Because to wake up is to break illusions, attachments, identities you thought were yours. The cost, the collapse of belonging. You become the silent observer at the edge of the room, hearing everything but resonating with nothing, and it hurts. Not because you're wrong, but because you're ahead. This pain isn't just emotional, it's existential. A sense of floating between worlds, one you've outgrown and another you haven't fully entered. You see through the masks, but you're not yet sure how to wear your truth. It's a liminal space, a psychological purgatory where clarity isolates before it liberates. People start to call you difficult, negative, cold, but what they're really saying is, you're making me uncomfortable with your truth. You're holding up a mirror, and that reflection, it forces them to feel. And feeling is what most are desperate to avoid. So they retreat, they gossip, they ghost. And each time they do, your mind gets quieter, not emptier, clearer. You begin to value solitude, not as absence, but as sanctuary. You stop begging for understanding and start building inner fortitude. Because you realize, not everyone can go where you're going. The truth is, seeing clearly costs connection, at least at first. It separates wheat from illusion. You start discerning who genuinely sees you and who only sees the version of you that never asked questions. And in that discernment, you lose, but you also begin to gain. You gain integrity, inner congruence, the rare feeling of standing whole in your own silence, without needing validation to breathe. And that is the foundation of true transformation, the kind that doesn't ask for permission. This is the price of a different mind, not noise, not rebellion, but the soft, persistent breaking of the shell around your soul, until what's real no longer needs to scream to be felt. It simply remains, unshaken, present, and free. What if the loneliness you feel isn't emptiness, but resonance without echo? A vibration your mind is sending out, only to find no match. That's what it's like when your subconscious begins to awaken. It speaks in symbols, sensations, memories that don't have names. You feel pulled by something invisible, something ancient, something that whispers, there is more. In this field, nothing is linear. Time folds in on itself. Emotions become colors, and thoughts become spaces you can walk through. You dream things that feel more real than your waking life. You remember truths that no one ever told you, but you've always known. This isn't imagination. It's a reconnection to the inner architecture of your psyche, the neural blueprint beneath your identity. And here's where the mirror begins to crack. Because once you step into the subconscious field, you start to see the roles you've played, the masks you've worn, the emotional costumes stitched together by childhood fears and inherited beliefs. Every reaction becomes a revelation, every trigger a message. You start to notice that what bothers you in others is often unhealed in you, that judgment is a defense, that love, when feared, becomes control, that silence isn't always peace, it can be suppression. The subconscious doesn't lie, it reveals, it reflects, it echoes what your conscious mind edits to survive. And when this mirror rises, you can't look away. You see your shadow, not as evil, but as exiled. The parts of you that were told they were too much, too sensitive, too strange. You see how your shame was never yours to carry, how your fear was inherited, how your guilt was taught. This is the emotional mirror, not a punishment, but a portal. Through it, you start to meet yourself beneath conditioning, beneath performance. You begin to sit with the pain instead of escaping it. You trace the thread of your anxiety back to its origin. You hold space for the child in you who still flinches at the sound of disapproval. The subconscious field is not chaotic. It's coded. It responds to presence, to intention. And when you stop resisting it, when you allow its symbols to speak, you begin to rewrite. Not with affirmations, but with understanding. You change the pattern by embracing the emotion, by becoming the safe space you never had. That's the mirror's secret. It doesn't show you who you should be. It shows you who you've always been, beneath the noise. And the deeper you go, the less afraid you become. Because the truth doesn't scare you any more, it stabilizes you. It grounds you. It becomes the frequency you live by. This is the power of the subconscious field. It's not mystical fluff. It's the internal language of transformation. And once you learn to read it, you stop being reactive and start becoming responsive. You stop fighting your emotions and start listening to them. In that space, you stop echoing others and start vibrating as yourself. There comes a moment when even pain starts to feel familiar, like a melody you never liked, but know by heart. This is how the mental loop works. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It seduces you back into patterns that feel safe because they're known, not because they're true. And every time you try to step out, something invisible pulls you back. That pull is not for tits programming. You've seen it. The cycle of self-doubt that follows every decision. The guilt that creeps in when you say no. The shame that rises when you speak your truth. These aren't just emotions, they're echoes of a system installed long before you had language to resist it. Beliefs passed down like heirlooms. Scripts inherited, not chosen. To break the loop, you must first name it. You must bring to light the mechanism behind your reactions. Why does silence make you anxious? Why do compliments make you flinch? Why do you sabotage what you crave the most? These aren't flaws, they're clues. Each one points to a place inside you where love was once withheld, where truth was once punished. And that's the paradox. The mind will protect the very wound that hurts it, just to avoid change. Because change, even when healing, feels like loss. A loss of identity, of certainty, of belonging. You begin to see that the loop isn't just external, it's internalized. It's no longer your parents' voice. It's yours, repeating their fear with your tone. But now, awareness disrupts the flow. The moment you observe your thoughts instead of becoming them, the cycle weakens. The moment you pause before reacting, you interrupt a script that's run for decades. You begin to reclaim authorship, not through force, but through clarity. This clarity is not easy. It demands confrontation, not with others, but with the stories you've lived inside. Stories where you're always too much or never enough, where worth is conditional, where safety means silence. These stories were never yours, but they shaped you. And now, they must be grieved before they can be released. Grief is the price of mental liberation. Not just grief for what happened, but for what could have been. For the versions of you that were never allowed to exist. For the love you had to earn. For the spaces where you had to shrink. And through this grief, something sacred happens. You begin to see yourself not as broken, but as interrupted. And what is interrupted can be resumed. Not from the place of pain, but from presence. From this very moment where you're no longer asleep, where you're no longer running loops you didn't write, where your mind, for the first time, becomes your ally. This is how the cycle breaks, not in battle, but in recognition. When you look at the mirror of your patterns and say, I see you, I know where you came from, but you don't decide anymore. The mental loop ends not with noise but with truth, and truth doesn't need to fight, it just needs to be seen. After the recognition, after the silence, after the moment when the cycle breaks, comes the emptiness. Not a void of despair, but a clean space, a sacred pause. It feels strange at first, like something is missing, but what's actually gone is the weight of pretending, the constant need to edit yourself just to survive. This is the space where integration begins, where you don't just think differently, you begin to feel differently. The emotions that once ruled you now start to teach you. Fear becomes a compass, sadness becomes a message, anger becomes a boundary, and shame becomes a doorway, one that, when walked through, leads not to weakness, but to profound self-compassion. You no longer reject parts of yourself to be loved. You begin to welcome them. The anxious child, the defensive protector, the part of you that still wants approval. You don't silence them, you sit with them, you witness their story, and in doing so, you integrate. You become whole, not by perfection, but by presence. And it's in this wholeness that a new kind of strength is born, one that doesn't need validation, one that doesn't crumble in the face of rejection. You no longer seek mirrors, you become one, quietly reflecting what others have lost in themselves. This phase is subtle. There are no fireworks, just a deeper breath, a quieter mind, a sense that you don't need to escape anymore. You find yourself drawn to solitude, not because the world is wrong, but because you are finally right with yourself. From here, transformation stops being a goal. It becomes your natural state, because you are no longer trying to fix the self. You're learning how to be with it, how to honor its wounds, how to trust its timing. You stop rushing healing, you start listening to it. Integration means the past no longer pulls you, and the future no longer owns you. You stand in the now, not as a moment, but as a field, a living space where your nervous system feels safe enough to let go, where your mind no longer guards, but guides, where your body, no longer braced for pain, begins to relax into trust. And this is the threshold, the edge of who you were and who you're becoming. You feel the old stories dissolve, the fears get quieter, the shame loses grip, and slowly the light returns, not from above, but from within. You're not the same, you're not performing, you're present. And presence is the root of all transformation. So stay here just a little longer. In this space between versions, let the stillness recalibrate your vibration. Let your breath anchor your truth. You've done the hardest part, seeing. Now comes the softest revolution, being. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you already knows there's no turning back. Not to who you were, not to what you once accepted, not to the comfort of pretending. You've crossed a threshold, not with your feet, but with your awareness. Now, I invite you to pause, not to end, but to mark this moment. The moment you chose truth over illusion, wholeness over performance, freedom over comfort. Go to the comments now and write, "I've crossed the threshold." Let this be your echo in the collective field. Let others find your words in the silence of their own awakening, because you're not alone even if you feel like you are. Here, we are building something sacred. A space where the unseen becomes language, where depth replaces noise, where your truth is not too much, it's medicine. So take a breath, and if this video moved something in you, share it. Not for numbers, but for resonance. There are others out there, standing at the same edge, waiting for a signal that it's safe to jump. Be that signal. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, not just to the channel, but to your own unfolding. Activate the bell so you don't miss what's coming next, because what's next goes deeper. We are not here to entertain, we are here to awaken, to remember, to reclaim the pieces of ourselves we were taught to abandon. Your presence here is not random, it's a response to an inner call, and now it's time to answer it. You've seen what happens when you think differently. Now you're ready to live differently, and once you do, you'll never need to pretend again.